Quiet on Set was by far one of the biggest phenomena to come out of 2024, with Drake Bell, an ex-Nickelodeon child actor, coming forward to talk about some gross misconduct that went on behind the scenes from producers and also writers at Nickelodeon at the time of him being there. So Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, obviously aired. It was a 5-part documentary television series that detailed behind the scenes world of children's television programs from the 1990s to the 2000s, with a special focus on Dan Schneider's tenure as producer and showrunner at Nickelodeon. The first 4 episodes aired in March 17th, 18th on 2024 on Investigation Discovery, and the 5th episode aired in April 7th, and the series was simultaneously released on Max and Discovery Plus. The series was produced by Maxine Productions with Sony Picture Television Nonification and the Business Insider. The series was loosely based on the Business Insider article about Nickelodeon from 2022. After the series was released, the show was positively reviewed by audiences and critics, with the praise given to the individuals who alleged having a negative experience working at Nickelodeon. However, criticism has drawn to the documentary not being in detail of Nickelodeon's workplace culture. Schneider has since released an apology video on his YouTube channel, fueling further discussions for the Nickelodeon stars and further comments from the individuals featured in the documentary. In addition, several individuals who wrote pleas for the leniency of the sexual offenders Brian Peck following his conviction have publicly rejected supporting him, especially in light of the documentary. The series also led to a widespread debate, particularly on social media, around the industry practices with regards to child actors, the loss of innocence, and the cost of fame for child stars. So the show was huge. Obviously, Dan Schneider came out and apologized, and then later came out again to say that he was actually going to be suing the producers of Quiet on Set for defamation and things like this, but that's gone awfully quiet, so I don't think that he actually went through with it. But there have been other child stars at the time at Nickelodeon, one notably that we're going to be looking at today, Ariana Grande, who has also come forward to talk about her time at Nickelodeon and the things that she experienced, because of course there were some very strange things going on, especially with her feet. But before we look into that, we're going to look at Drake Bell talking about the reflection period that he had after Quiet on Set aired a couple of months ago now.
We are back. It's 8:35 with a Today exclusive. Actor and singer Drake Bell's first broadcast interview since appearing in the explosive docuseries Quiet on the Set. That's the dark side of kids' TV.
NBC's senior national correspondent and NBC News Daily anchor Kate Snow sat down with him. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, guys. So in the early 2000s, Drake Bell was one of Nickelodeon's biggest child stars. But in the recent docuseries Quiet on Set, Bell shocked fans and the industry when he opened up about being sexually abused starting at just 14 years old by an on-set dialogue coach. Well, now Bell is speaking out exclusively to Today, talking about why he chose to reveal what happened and how it's changed his life. We also talked about his mission to make sure what happened to him doesn't happen to another child.
It's been a life-changing few months for former child star Drake Bell. Now 37, the former teen star of the hit Nickelodeon show Drake and Josh is making new music.
I came here today to tell my story.
And still processing the enormous reaction to the Max docuseries Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV.
This literally blew up. Like, the amount of support that Drake Bell got regarding this was enormous. I don't think anyone was prepared for the waves that this was going to send through not only social media, but actual, like, you know, mainstream television.
Why did you decide to do that docuseries and share your story?
Things were spiraling out of control personally and mentally, and I thought, you know, maybe this could help in the healing process and also help others who have gone through the same situations or similar situations.
In Quiet on Set, Bell opens up publicly for the first time about being repeatedly sexually assaulted as a teenager by a dialogue coach, Brian Peck, who worked with Bell at Nickelodeon in the early 2000s.
I see emotions coming up in you.
It's hard. Because if I tried to go and talk to that little boy, with all of that going through my head and my mind, what am I going to tell him?
Terrified and confused, he says he kept it a secret for a long time, eventually confiding in his mom. Peck was arrested and pleaded no contest to 2 charges of child sexual abuse and was sentenced to 16 months in prison. He had to register as a sex offender.
16 months in prison feels too lenient for an incident to this, like, magnitude. 2 charges of child sexual abuse, and he got 16 months in prison. Like, no.
Nickelodeon, in response to Quiet on Set, told us in part, "We have adopted numerous safeguards over the years to protect child actors, including hiring studio welfare workers, requiring parents and guardians to be with their child on set, and doing criminal background checks on employees."
Too little, too late. It's just too little, too late.
Do you think that's enough?
No.
Well, it's very difficult to say because Brian would have passed a background check.
In the years after his abuse, Bell says he battled substance use.
You're so frightened of facing this stuff that you try to cloud it with as much as you can.
This is the issue, and obviously, you know, Drake Bell it's got a bit of a history of, you know, alleged abuse himself on ex-partners and stuff, but obviously there is no excuse for it, but when you look at his background and you look at what's gone on, 9 times out of 10 children that have been abused grow up to become abusers themselves. Obviously that's a very ballpark figure statistic, but it's quite common to be the case.
3 years ago, Bell himself pled guilty to attempted child endangerment and disseminating matter harmful to juveniles after he says he sent inappropriate messages to a 15-year-old female fan. He says he didn't know she was underage. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation.
There were some messages that shouldn't have been exchanged.
Is that why you pled guilty?
And that's why I pled guilty. But once the age was revealed, that's when I stopped communication.
After going to rehab last year, Bell says he's sober today. He's moved to Mexico City, where his music career is booming. This fall, he'll release his 6th studio album, where he writes about the darkness of his past and turning it into light.
What I've learned is that you're not alone. That's something I lived with for a very long time. I was thinking that I was alone in this. And now I get to see all of that in a clear picture. And I get to go back and talk to that little boy.
What do you say? What do you say to that little boy now?
What do you say?
Now I'm able to go back to him and hold him and tell him, you know, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna find strength. This is something that happened to me. This isn't me.
Mm-hmm. Bell and his ex-wife have a 3-year-old son.
Was part of your motivation speaking out because of your son?
Yeah, and as he grows, my hope is that he'll be able to say, yeah, my dad did go through that. And the man that I know today is a hero to me.
That's just wonderful, isn't it? But of course, you know, this is something that Drake Bell has got to live with, unfortunately, for the rest of his life. I don't think any level of therapy or, you know, disclosure or, you know, closure really does close that chapter of your life. But what's important is you grow as a human from it. But Ariana Grande was also a huge child star at the time of Drake Bell, of course, as well. She's gone on to probably be one of the most successful Nickelodeon kids ever. Obviously, she was part of the show Victorious, I believe, and a couple of other shows with Nickelodeon. But there were just some very weird things that she also was told to do by Dan Schneider specifically. Not, you know, in terms of SA like what Drake Bell suffered from, but apparently Dan Schneider had a thing for feet, and you can really tell that with Ariana Grande. So here is what she said about apparently reprocessing her time on Nickelodeon amid quiet on set allegations. Here it is.
I think we're reprocessing our relationship to it a little bit now.
Ariana Grande is reflecting on her time as a Nickelodeon child star amid the fallout of the release of the docuseries Quiet on Set. The pop star appears on the June 12th episode of actor Penn Badgley's podcast Pod Crushed. When asked about her time as a child actor, Ariana seemingly alludes to the documentary when talking about her role on Nickelodeon's hit show Victorious when she was 14 years old, saying she's reworking what the experience was like for her.
We've had different child doctors on the show who feel differently. Some who are like, I would never let my kids, I don't think anyone should, and others who are open to it as long as there's like certain conditions on set.
Obviously, my relationship to it has and is currently and has been changing, and I'm reprocessing a lot of what the experience was like.
The Boy Is Mine singer also stresses that environments for child actors need to be made safer.
Yeah, I think that the environment needs to be made safer if kids are going to be acting, and I think there should be therapists. I think there should be parents allowed to be wherever they want to be, and I think not only on kids' sets. I think if anyone wants to do this or music or anything at the level of exposure that it means to be on TV or to do music with a major label or whatever, there should be in the contract something about therapy is mandatory twice a week or thrice a week or something like that. A lot of people don't have the support that they need to get through performing at that level at such a young age, but also dealing with some of the things that the survivors who've come forward, and there's not a word for how devastating that is to hear about. And so I think the environment just needs to be made a lot safer all around.
The 30-year-old expresses that she's grateful at the conversations surrounding the industry that are happening now.
In any work environment, I'm glad that this conversation is happening here and also in the world, because it's also just kind of a cultural shift.
Yes. I agree. And I think, if the conversation wasn't had, things would just continue as they were. I'm sure Disney aren't squeaky clean. Nickelodeon obviously aren't squeaky clean. And other networks who work with kids, they need to all be kind of vetted, checked. There needs to be safeguarding in place for children. Like, you wouldn't send your child into school and expect, you hand over parental responsibility to the teacher when you hand your child over. And you wouldn't expect them, you'd expect them to get the best possible care. It should be the exact same when they go on set to work, essentially.
Any work environment. I'm glad that this conversation is happening here and also in the world, because it's also just kind of a cultural shift that's happening where it's not just actors and singers and whatever. If you ask anyone who's ever worked ever, if they've ever been sort of dealt with a boss that had a really bad ego and temper and whatever, or if they've been sexually harassed or even assaulted, or it's everywhere ever.
She also notes that some of the humor and innuendos in Victorious, which were highlighted in Quiet on Set, don't sit well with her now.
Speaking specifically about our show, I think that was something that we were convinced was the cool thing about us, is that we pushed the envelope with our humor, and the innuendos were we were told and convinced as well that it was the cool differentiation.
I mean, the innuendos were bad, but I think there's the difference is that the times were different back in the 90s and the 2000s. Obviously, if you watch shows, not even just on Nickelodeon or Disney, but also in the UK, CBBC and stuff like that, you could get away with saying a lot more back then than what you could now necessarily. I see shows pop up all the time on my Instagram reels or whatever, and it's how was this allowed? This would never pass on TV anymore. Little Britain especially, or Come Fly With Me. It's bad, and it would never ever get to TV today, but it did back then because the humor was edgy. It was, I guess, more accepted, I suppose. Whereas now, obviously, there's a lot of, inclusion and discrimination is obviously horrifically frowned upon, which rightfully so.
And I don't know, I think it just all happened so quickly, and now looking back on some of the clips, I'm like, that's damn, like, really?
Yeah.
And the
Like if my daughter, sorry to,
No.
I just, you think about it, it's like, if I had a daughter, it's like, and
E! News has reached out to Nickelodeon for comment, but has not yet heard back. It's the first time Ari has spoken publicly about her Nickelodeon experience since the March release of the bombshell docuseries Quiet on Set. The series explores alleged toxic work environments on producer Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon shows. No Victorious cast members were featured in the doc, though star Victoria Justice recently reacted to Marie Claire, saying something that was very evident in the documentary is that Dan had a very large ego, and sometimes that ego clouded his better judgment and affected the way he treated people. Dan apologized shortly after the doc's release.
Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult, me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
He also later filed a lawsuit against the producers of the documentary, which also covers Brian Peck's child sex abuse case involving Drake Bell, for which Peck served 16 months in prison, alleging the series falsely implied Schneider was a child sex abuser by including him in the documentary alongside Peck. E! News reached out to Investigation Discovery for comment on that lawsuit on behalf of Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers Discovery, Maxine Productions, and Sony Pictures Television at the time, but did not hear back.
I don't think we're going to hear anything about that, but what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to jump to get the hell out of that like button if you have gone on to enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. Tick on my little bell so you get notified whenever we upload. Until next time, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Cannot wait to see you in the next one, and I'll speak to you later. Peace.